Hey guys, today's screencast is going to cover basic SQL injection attacks. To do this, I want to introduce you to the XKCD comic Little Bobby Tables. And you can find this on the web just by searching for Bobby Tables. And it's a good illustration of how you can actually break someone's database simply by entering in a specifically crafted input into a text input on a web page or into an application if the developers have not properly sanitized their database inputs. So how does this actually work? So imagine you have an input on a web page where somebody wants to filter the students by name. So you type in a student name, you click the filter button, and it queries only the students with that first name. So it would, at runtime, want to construct a SQL statement along the lines of select star from students where name is equal to quote Robert. However, we can't hard code that in. We have to dynamically insert into the SQL statement what they typed into the text box. So what happens is we create a input on the HTML side that accepts some sort of arbitrary input from the user, and then when the PHP processes the web page's post event, we take that value that's been posted to the website, we store it in a temporary variable, and then we use that variable to then construct a SQL statement. It looks something like this: select star from students where name equals quote, and then we do a variable substitution for $filter, unquote, semicolon. So it's very straightforward. We're just in real time constructing a SQL statement. What that ends up being, if we enter in Robert, is select star from students where name equals quote Robert. But what if somebody decided to maliciously enter something that would rewrite our SQL statement? Let's talk about how that could occur. Imagine if somebody entered the following string into the search box. It would be Robert, quote, semicolon, and then a malicious statement such as drop table students, semicolon, followed by a pair of dashes. How does that actually rewrite our query? Well, this is what the query would look like if we just did a variable substitution for $filter right into our SQL statement. But you have to understand that that red text is what they entered, but what happens is it gets parsed by MySQL as three different statements. The first statement is select star from students where name equals quote Robert. The second one in red is drop table students, and then the third one is just a series of 4 characters that will get ignored. So how does this work? The first part closes out our first SQL statement. Notice how, because they put in Robert quote semicolon, that the select star from students where name equals quote and then Robert quote semicolon completes a full statement. Then it continues on parsing and sees a second statement embedded right after the first. Then the third portion begins with dash dash, which according to MySQL is a comment, which means ignore everything from this point on. So if we take literally what they entered in and just do a variable substitution and pass that through to MySQL, MySQL sees a statement that needs to be executed, another statement that needs to be executed, and a group of characters that just gets ignored. What happens if we actually pass this whole string of characters over to MySQL and tell it to run it? Well, the student table disappears. So what does this look like in actual code? Here I have a web page that I set up that's very simple. It creates a basic filter here on line 7, setting the value equal to Robert, just like as if they had entered Robert into the search box. It then connects to the database and then builds a SQL statement here on line 20 that dynamically does a variable substitution for $filter right into the SQL statement. It then prepares, executes, and fetches the records that come back and dumps it out onto the screen. So let's take a look at what happens when we run it. If we refresh this page, you'll see that it runs that query and dumps out the results from MySQL. If I then go back in and uncomment line 10 here and save it to the database, it's going to take that malicious string of characters, which is going to, as we said earlier, close out the first statement and then insert in a second statement. And then we save it and run it. When we refresh the page, it works fine. However, if we refresh the page again, the student table has disappeared because that query that we ran retrieved the records, got the record for Robert, but then dropped the student's table. Now that it's gone, subsequent attempts to read the table won't work. So this has been a brief introduction to how to perform a basic SQL injection attack against a server. And what we're going to talk about in class next week is how you mitigate this risk. I'll go ahead and tell you that the thing we need to do is, instead of using a straight variable substitution into our string for our SQL statement, we're going to use a prepared statement, but we are going to bind parameters to our statement rather than just stick a variable straight into the SQL.